Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Built to Finish. Today's guest is an executive who has over 25 years of executive management experience in enterprise computing, software, networks, and services markets. He has co-founded multiple successful companies. He was also involved in 2 IPOs, specifically Sun Microsystems and Tri-Teal. Additionally, he served as the president and CEO of RF Code, where they secured Tier 1 VC financing and delivered premier RFID products. He is recognized as a technology industry thought leader and serves on numerous boards for both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. He currently serves as the CEO of NewBlock, which focuses on strategic consulting and implementation services in AI. Armando Viteri, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, great to have you. And it's wonderful to be speaking with an AI expert because obviously AI is top of mind for so many industries, specifically the software one.
I knew when my housekeeper started asking me questions about AI that had really gone totally viral. It seemed to be the conversation of the moment.
100%, 100%. So I wrote some code back in the day. And obviously, a lot of it was very, algorithm based. And there's still a lot of software companies that are creating algorithm based technologies and solutions. How is this seismic shift in the industry around AI impacting those types of companies?
Well, we've all been through these various waves of technology coming through the years. I'm a little bit older than you are, as I demonstrated by the gray beard and bald head. So I was involved. I was heavily involved in the advent of client server computing as part of Sun Microsystems. Certainly, we've seen that way evolving into the PC, evolving into mobile computing, evolving into the internet, et cetera, et cetera. All these various waves that have come in various stages. I don't think any of them are as fundamental a shift for businesses, large and small, as this one is. And because those other waves, what all they really meant is a change in internal processes to adapt to technology to be able to achieve a higher level of productivity for a corporation or for an individual, right? This one is a fundamental shift in which from 2.5 years ago forward for the rest of our lives, we will be in some manner or another cyborgs, in that our everyday life, be it our personal life, our work life, et cetera, we'll always have an AI companion at our side in everything that we do. And that certainly changes people's behavior, right? But it more importantly, completely changes the makeup and nature of businesses. So for businesses, this is not just a technological shift; it's a cultural shift.
Hmm.
It's a reskilling of workforce shift. To quote a notable person in the AI industry, Andrew Ng, he was once stated, "Well, AI is never going to take away your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI will be the one that takes away your job."
Well said.
You have an enormous number of people that are having to adopt in real time to a new reality, this new cyborg reality of what we are, how we contribute, how we create, et cetera. And companies as a whole, as an organic whole made up of people, winds up shifting even more dramatically than the individual himself.
Wow. So we will always have an AI companion. Well, you can easily argue that we've had an AI companion for many, many years, right? Rain sensing windshield wipers, cruise control in the car. That was an early version of AI and nobody was scared of those. So there really isn't a lot of reason to fear. This is just a much more enhanced version of it.
Yeah, but somehow when the technology crosses the threshold, what we as human hold most dear is our intellect and our creativity.
Sure.
The windshield wiper affected neither. However, this one does. OpenAI introduced the first reasoning models into the market. So that was a step beyond the first generation generative AI is instantiated by ChatGPT. They've introduced a whole new paradigm, which is the reasoning model, which can break down complex problems and break them down into a chain of thought that eventually becomes an output through a very thorough dissection of the problem that it's given. Those reasoning models, of which OpenAI was the first, um, is important because it winds up being able to produce, a PhD candidate level of work in whatever field, whatever question that you're applying towards it. So all of a sudden, I have I have an MIT PhD that I can ask any question, anytime, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Oh my God, that's that is different from that windshield wiper.
I could not agree more. So going back to the software market, what do you think are the most critical challenges traditional software companies are facing in this AI-driven market?
Man, it's a complicated question because anybody's guess, right? Uh, Clearly, there are. Well, let's take it from the perspective of different audiences. Let's start from the investor community. Um, the high point of venture capital, private equity investing was in 2020, 2021. Those companies happened before generative AI came on the scene. So you have this enormous quantity of software startup companies that got funded back in the day before this new technology came online. And I will guarantee you that any problem that they were trying to solve with traditional algorithmic approaches and even with narrow AI approaches can be solved better by having a hybrid of traditional algorithmic, narrow AI, and generative AI into the solution. As a result, that huge portfolio of companies, many companies worth, are worthless is a strong word, but it's the word that comes to mind. They're certainly not very valuable. They're not very valuable from a marketplace perspective because if there is a competitor that's solving the same class of problem using an AI methodology, that company is going to get picked every time. And they're not valuable from the perspective of an exit either, because quite frankly, they what companies are looking, what larger companies are looking to acquire are companies that do have capabilities in AI, because they themselves, those acquirers, are trying to themselves migrate toward being AI at the core. So it doesn't make sense to acquire companies that are outliers to what clearly the direction of the entire industry is. So that's kind of from an investor perspective. And certainly a lot of the work that we do as a company is that we get approached by VCs that have these portfolio companies that are pre-generative AI, and we help them how to convert those companies into being AI enabled at a minimum, hopefully over time in a roadmap, AI at the core. But how can we the most quickly get them and the most cost effectively get them to being an AI enabled company so that they can raise that next round, so they can go close that next customer, et cetera. Now, if you look at it from but your question was more broadly the entire software industry. This is a really tricky one because there are already lots of rumblings and at least a few instantiations where companies are starting to realize that they don't really need enterprise SaaS, because if they have fully trained models, they're more than likely being able to implement with the relatively low cost and a short amount of time, are able to recreate the capabilities of functionality of what they were getting from the traditional enterprise SaaS company. So already you have some very notable announcements. Klarna is kind of the poster child of this. Klarna, the most successful fintech company to come out of Europe in a very, very long time. They were struggling, and that it turned out that their offering turned out to be very uh, people intensive in terms of support, customer support. So they wound up implementing a generative AI system that, as a result, displaced about the equivalent of 700 headcount. So all of a sudden, they went from a company that was struggling with getting to a decent EBITDA to now they, by that one move alone, which I don't know how much they spent. I doubt they spent more than a couple $1 million implementing this, through $40 million to the bottom line. So all of a sudden they wound up from a company that was, although revenue successful, were struggling in terms of how they were actually going to exit, whether even they could IPO, for example, to something that's a very viable company. In fact, I believe that they are already planning on their IPO. But in that process, they picked up a lot of AI capability through both their partners and internally. And so the very next thing that they did is that they turned off Salesforce.com and they turned off Workday. And they did that in pretty close succession after they introduced this customer service AI agent.
That is huge. An AI solution replacing a prominent SaaS solution like Salesforce and Workday.
Yeah, because let's face it, these a lot of these companies wind up with these $1 million plus bills every year for products like that. These enterprise SaaS products, um, they those kind of spends stand out like sore thumbs on the balance sheet. They are always reviewing, do we really need this stuff? Well, for Salesforce, it was the only solution. It's a system of record. So what are you going to do? Of course, you're going to do that, right? You're going to continue paying it. But now there's some alternatives here that are low cost and in-house developed. So what's going to be interesting in the software space, especially for startups, this personal thesis, many may disagree. I'm willing to be wrong. In fact, I'm willing to, if anybody wants to take a bet on the other side, I'm willing to take this one. Okay.
You'll,
My belief,
you'll take that action any day.
I'll take that action any day. But I think we are in the twilight of enterprise SaaS, because I think that Klarna was was shining a light on the way forward. And as it's the twilight enterprise SaaS, you will wind up finding enterprise customers, and this is our bread and butter business. Is that we get approached by enterprise companies, Global 1000 companies, and they ask us, gee, let's build an AI roadmap together. And we know that over time, we're going to have to develop 50, 60 different AI agents, because the model typically is that for every white collar worker that you have in house, you're going to wind up augmenting his productivity by developing an AI agent to support that person. And in some cases, 30 or 40% boost in productivity. In some cases, certain fields, it's 1,000% increase in productivity, right? In software development, it's an enormous boost, especially for junior engineers, enormous boost in productivity. So depending on the job category, but in all cases, you're augmenting that white collar worker's productivity. And as a result of doing that, you wind up, these companies approach us with the idea of let's figure out which is the highest impact, lowest cost, and least risky AI agent that I can develop at the beginning of a multi-year roadmap toward developing these 50 or 60 agents that are going to enable the corporation. Then eventually they will want to take those agents and attach the workflows between them, which is ultimately what will define a corporation's being AI at the core enterprise, which is the ultimate objective. But going back to the startup question, is where does that live? If the enterprise is really moving direction of bespoke implementations and getting rid of enterprise SaaS and not, and for that matter, not adopting AI third-party solutions, right? Because they're developing bespoke systems. Where's the opportunity? Personally, I believe that the opportunity really centers on the SMB market. And the kind of startup I love that I get approached by is one in which you have two core founders. One is an absolute positive domain expert. They live, breathe, and they know every nuance, every problem, every angle that exists in that particular vertical space. And then that's coupled with a credible technology partner that knows AI. For that and those, that pair of people wind up targeting the SMB space, because the SMB space, where in the enterprise, it may make sense to go spend $1 million developing an AI agent. In the SMB space, it's unlikely that they have either the technical sophistication, much less the capital required to wind up doing a series of $1 million agents. So that's where the opportunity is for a software company using AI to be able to go after a market. Okay. And for me, kind of the poster child of that is a company here locally in Phoenix by the name of RE Tech, where the founder, Sarah Richardson, she is a long time real estate person. She was the founder of True Realty, which is one of the few national realties in the country. And she left that behind to go start up an AI company because, as it turns out, the economics of a real estate brokerage are terrible, single digit gross margins, et cetera. By implementing a series of agents to automate the kind of the front office work, the back office work, all the documentation, all the headaches that exist in buying a home. By automating all that through AI, you can significantly increase the EBITDA associated with the gross margin, and then in turn the EBITDA associated with any one of the brokerages. It completely transforms their economics fundamentally. That is absolutely the kind of company it is. Just yesterday, I got approached by another one that was doing exactly the same thing for dentist offices. Right? Same idea. First, their very first product, automating their front office. An AI agent that'll handle the scheduling, knows who you are when you call them, says, "Oh, yes, you're scheduled for a root canal. I can get you in on Tuesday." Right? The front office kind of work. Then they're automating the back office kind of work. So the accounting and all that kind of stuff that happens. And then ultimately, they are automating the workflow of the dentist himself. Once again, a dental practice is not going to be the one that's going to go spend, multiple agents, $1 million at a time. But man, can they benefit out of a product like this?
100%. I have several friends that are dentists. I'm going to see most of them this weekend. So I can't wait to share this conversation with them to to let them start looking forward to what's coming down the pike for them. So you've just covered a lot. Uh, so you've all heard it here first. The SaaS industry is going to be radically disrupted by AI alternatives, just like the SaaS industry.
Enterprise SaaS. The SMB businesses has an opportunity. If they migrate toward AI, they have a huge opportunity.
Got it. So just like SaaS significantly disrupted on-premise solutions, if any on-premise software provider if there was a SaaS alternative in the market for them, those won in the marketplace. And now you're saying that enterprise SaaS is in danger of being displaced by AI solutions. I don't disagree, but very, very bold prediction.
Well, my predict this will happen quickly. You'll see in a 5-year period, you're going to see a rapid decline. That's my prediction.
So from again back to I'm the owner of a software company. I'm developing software, algorithmic based approaches, et cetera, et cetera. For me to implement AI, are you saying that the software company needs to have AI in the customer facing component of their solution? And or do they need to heavily utilize AI for better internal productivity from code development, use case, testing scenarios, customer support, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. Yeah, in all these companies, it's it's two ways that they need to use it. One, and most importantly, is in their technology stack. And so, it's software company dependent, right? So if there is certainly at a minimum, people are migrating toward this idea of having conversational relationship, natural language relationship with any piece of software that they interact with. So at a minimum, being able to use uh, the strength of conversationality of generative AI is something that needs to be integrated in. But there are more fundamental places in the product line to be able to integrate these in. That's on the product stack, and that's the most important to make sure they're competitive. Then on the operational stack, there's all kinds of opportunities to kind of enable their software developers to be more productive, to make their marketing people more productive, to make customer support not wind up turning into dozens of people, right? Their sales force shouldn't be huge, where it instinctively software companies before would have started out, well, B2B software companies would have instinctually started setting up regional offices with tech support, a big customer support system, pre-sales, engineers, all that, all that infrastructure and spend. A lot of that radically collapses. In fact, one of our own portfolio, as an example, one of our own portfolio companies um, had um, 60 salespeople total. By implementation of a conversational interface using AI, we now have 7. But revenues are through the roof for that company. So not only did we go from 60 to 7, we went from we doubled revenues in the process. Right. So it's that kind of transformation of both but so you're right. It's on the technology roadmap stack. It's also on the operational side of how these businesses are run. And all kinds of people are now predicting, how long before there's a unicorn software company that has only one person in it. That's kind of an extreme case. I don't believe that that's possible.
Yeah, I mean that's a really dramatic reduction in headcount, right? As you were saying this, I vividly remember our regional sales offices, our international sales offices, having the solution architects, having the sales support staff. I mean, it was a lot of headcount and a lot of expense. So, thank you very much for this example. Like if and when I do it again, it's going to cost me significantly less from a go-to-market perspective. So I wholeheartedly believe that that is possible. But we're really talking about a dramatic reduction in headcount. So which I think is
90% headcount reductions in sales, marketing, and customer support functions is a reasonable benchmark. So it is a pretty dramatic shift.
yeah, it's very dramatic.
It's not 100%, right? Because there's awful lot of relationship building, right? In that part, I mean, unless you want to go out, play around the golf with ChatGPT, which I wouldn't recommend, probably would tell you how to hit better, and then it would be annoying. Right?
Just like my current golf partners.
You still have to develop human trust and human relationship and human confidence and et cetera, et cetera. Right. And so the soft skill factors are always still there. But I'm taking this one example, but you take this example, take it, apply it to any field. Um, let's pick a random one. Healthcare. So a recent study was done in which something on the order of 100,000 mammographs were submitted to doctors to review, to radiologists to review, And then those same 100,000 were submitted to AI. This is AI as of today. This is not AI as it gets more sophisticated about this, right? And where it's trained on that much more information, et cetera. 28% improvement in detection rates. 28%. And in fact, I was just recently talking to a young doctor that's just going through his residency, and I wound up citing the example of a friend of mine who wound up his son wound up having a bit of a spill, and in the process wound up hurting his arm. Wound up going into an urgent care, and the urgent care doctor took the X-ray and said, "Yeah, there's no break here. It's fine. It's just sprained," or whatever he said. Right. The father had the presence of mind to scan that X-ray into a computer so that the AI could read it, and the AI detected the clear break that was there. So the father then immediately went to a hospital and had it set the same day. Had they allowed that to go for a long time, it would have been a much more complicated situation where they may have had to re-break it. They would have had to, they would have had to do a lot of stuff that would have been completely unnecessary. But again, AI already is more accurate. So I'm just picking a random example of kind of the performance of yet another white collar worker, a doctor, and how AI can augment them. And I am just waiting. And this will happen very soon. This second prediction of the day. It will happen very soon that a doctor will have a bad outcome and will be sued as a result of not having used AI
Wow,
in his diagnosis. And
that's
he
even
will
that's even more
lose.
bold than the first one.
That's going to happen very soon.
I have a colleague that I've been speaking with for the last couple of years whose company has developed an AI solution, and they pivoted to a medical use case where if there's a medical professional taking a biopsy from a patient, right? So there's a whole to do of getting a patient ready for a biopsy. They get the biopsy, then they have to take that biopsy and present it to a pathologist the next day or 2 days later. And then I forget the number, but it was high, double-digit percentages, where the pathologist says you didn't capture enough tissue. You have to do it again. So now you have to take the patient, through all of this stress to get him or her back into the office, do the biopsy again, etc. And so my colleague's AI solution is right there with the medical professional doing the biopsy, letting them know whether they have enough for the pathologist to process.
Well, yeah, we will all be cyborgs, right? Not a cyborg in that direct neural attachment like Neuralink is doing, but even still, I mean, it's direct attachment as in the phone in your pocket, right? And certainly, I use, for example, I use various AI models for my personal use, first personal and business use. I probably do at least 50 queries a day, everything from help me think through this problem all the way through, hey, can you come up, these are the ingredients that are in my refrigerator. Can you come up with a cool recipe out of it? Right. So I run the gamut, but it is a constant use.
Yeah, I love it. I don't use it as much as you do, but I do use it, and I have a positive experience every single time. So going back to the point you made about headcount, this is going to result in dramatic reductions in headcount. Um, this is music to the ears of private equity firms and investors, right? So how are they, other than incredibly positively, how specifically are they adopting to this, AI, to these AI driven efficiencies that companies are going to be experiencing or should be experiencing?
This is the question of the hour, right? What is going to be the societal impact for this? And embedded in all that is, how what kind of financial returns we're going to get. So on the financial return side, you certainly will be able to take an enterprise class organization and radically reduce it in the headcount to be able to achieve the same level of output. You will have that ability. So, from a cold blooded private equity perspective, which sometimes private equity can be a little bit less sensitive about talking about people and their lives, but from the private equity perspective, there's no better time in the history of private equity. They just, in most cases, the only problem is that in most cases, private equity is only coming up to speed now about what the implication would be. Because if I were sitting on a private equity portfolio of companies that are in the technology, actually any portfolio of companies, and I knew that I could achieve a 20 or 30% improvement in EBITDA by implementing AI in that organization. Oh my God, it completely transformed the value of my portfolio, right? That today is only metered by the sophistication of the private equity firm and also, importantly, access to these sorts of sophisticated AI people, which are in extremely limited supply today. Obviously, that problem gets better over time, but for right now, they are few and far between. And certainly, the best and brightest of these AI guys that could be make substantive impact are not necessarily people that are going to go work for a Fortune 500 company, right? So it's hard from the actual implementation perspective, and that's most common. The access to engineering part is the part that we tend to solve as a company. We have the scalable ability to be able to provide. We're able to provide these kind of resources at scale, right? That's what we do. However, it is currently a bottleneck worldwide.
Okay. So I totally get it. A lot of private equity, most private equity firms, have their playbook, right? They have their playbook for sales, for marketing, for operations, et cetera, and they try to implement these best practices across their portfolio companies. So are you currently seeing examples of private equity firms that are doing better than others to gain these AI efficiencies? And are you seeing them implement these same types of playbook activities across their portfolio?
Starting to, it's early on. I think it's only starting to dawn on them that they should take the playbook and completely throw it away, right? Because it's a completely different playbook now, right? Playbook now is all right, take the top 10 most high impact agents, go implement them inside the firm. And as a result of that, kind of rejigger the firm now to be able to achieve better EBITDA and better financial results. Having said all that, I led by saying that private equity tends to be a bit cold blooded. I think that it is short sighted to immediately think that the way what AI really translates into is headcount reduction, right? I think there are more sophisticated ways to be able to implement a better long term solution as a result of job reskilling. Because quite frankly, AI is also enabling one of the things that's kind of hidden in the background in all this is that most of the kinds of jobs that are impacted, probably with the exception of software development, a lot of those are kind of soft skill kind of jobs, a sales guy, a customer call center person, et cetera. Well, in the era of AI, the hard skills wind up being reduced in value and the soft skills wind up disproportionately rising in value because the hard skills, taking idea and translating it into a piece of code, those kind of hard skills will be more and more done by AI. And potentially, within certainly one generation, many of those hard skills can actually be implemented by somebody that has no hard skill background, right? But has the soft skills to be able to extract from interaction with people. What is the functionality this piece of code needs to have? What does this product really need to be, et cetera, right? So a more sophisticated firm will take the perspective of, geez, I can I can either just reduce workforce or I can job reskill in a way that winds up making me a much more successful company long term, not simply a more profitable one. So that's a strategic decision that if boardrooms aren't having that discussion now, they certainly are having it within a very short period of time, right? Certainly within the next 2 years, they're having exactly that discussion about who do we want to be as a corporation, and how are we going to absorb the impact of this new technology, because it's a radical change. So that goes back to my original point I was making, that this is the most significant cultural shift for for businesses that has happened in my lifetime, because they are going to, what a business is something very different 5 to 10 years from now. And so somehow they need to bridge that transition. And those that don't bridge that transition will wind up failing in the process.
If there's a fly on the wall that's listening into every single boardroom conversation, the amount of times the word AI is used has to be, through the roof and exponentially increasing, because those conversations
Yeah.
are definitely taking place.
But the problem is that the people that are leading the conversation, more oftentimes than not, are strategic consulting firms, management consulting firms, the McKinseys, the Bains, the
Hmm.
BCGs, et cetera, right? They don't know from AI. So it's one of these blind leading the blind problems, that they have no, the consultant that you're paying some ungodly amount per day has no more sophistication than you do about what this technology actually means and how it should be implemented, and what is the strategic implementation of doing it this way versus that way, et cetera. And that's the biggest problem, is that, um, as you put it, the playbook. These companies are following the playbook, and the playbook is go call McKinsey.
A really entertaining commercial comes to mind. I don't know if you remember this. This was at least 15, 20 years ago, where these management consultants were sitting with their CEO client, and they go, you know what, sir? Based on all of our analysis, you need to accelerate inventory velocity. And he's thinking, smiling. He goes, you know what? I agree. Do it. And then the two consultants laugh at each other and they're like, sir, we just advise. We don't actually do. So almost identical to what you just said. Everybody's saying you must implement AI, but they are clueless in terms of how to actually get it done.
Are you talking about that McKinsey guy is going to be some 27-year-old Stanford MBA? What does he know from AI?
Exactly.
That is a good point you bring aside. There is a movement toward the CIO becoming the CAIO, right? That's a movement. However, it's the same CEO, only they just added a letter to his title, right? So that's problem number one. But problem number two is that this is a fundamental shift, that if you are a company of any size and you don't have a real AI expert on your board, oh my God, that's a strategic mistake. I'm not talking about some McKinsey guy, right? That's really, really good at PowerPoint. I'm talking about a real person that understands AI as applied to business. Every single board of every single public company should have one of those guys on that board.
Totally agree. If anybody here is early on in their careers and they're looking to build a skill set that is going to be incredibly valuable in the future, please pick up AI. So speak about the future. What and folks that may not know as much as others about AI, what role do you see government and regulations playing going forward, since AI is going to be so integral in everything around us in the future?
I wish I had a nice, clean answer to that. I'll give you a gut response to it, which is, there's a real danger of regulating too early. Because at this point, we don't really know, like my broad statement about the devolution of enterprise SaaS. That's my guess, right? And certainly, it's those kind of broad strokes of how AI will evolve, but winds up turning into regulation and strangling out innovation too early. Because let's face it, regulation, one guiding principle of uh, of regulation is the rule of unexpected consequences, right? So my gut tells me too early to think about regulation, except a few corner cases. I think copyright law certainly needs to be rejiggered in this era. I think that being able to produce not regulation but guidelines for for the ways that models can interact with people, right? Because I do think that there is potential for harm in people becoming overly reliant on these models on kind of a personal basis that can have a really bad outcome. And it does make I've seen a million of these startups that are trying to do AI therapists of one form or another. That's scary to me.
That's very scary.
I think, but I don't know that that's regulations as it is guideline at this stage, right? I think that people forming deep personal relationships with an AI is already happening, right? What was it? There is one AI company that wound up that will remain unnamed that had these AI companions, right? That would increasingly know about you over time, right? And it could behave like a boyfriend girlfriend in its interactions. That company wound up feeling a bit uncomfortable about that, turned off that capability, had essentially an enormous number of their users dropped off because that is what these people wanted, right? And they had to turn the capability back on. So it's already happening that people are forming these deep personal relationships, emotional relationships with these AIs. And I do think that that's an area for guideline of what that means before it turns in, especially as you get into a therapist that's an AI, et cetera.
Well, the good news there is, and I love what you just said, somebody shut it off. So when an AI it, gets out of control or exceeds whatever expectations were originally set, a human is still able, and I think will be for a very long time, to shut it off.
Yes, for a foreseeable time, but all kinds of there are all kinds of weird test cases that people have tried with AIs and it has unexpected results in the way that they interact.
You've alluded to the capabilities and services that you offer in the AI space through your company, New Block. Can you just go over that at a high level again so everybody understands exactly what it is you bring to the market?
Sure. About 25% of our business is for startups. And it's typically either companies that were born before generative AI and need to integrate AI into the technology stack. So it become AI enabled, or otherwise startup companies that are really desperately searching to be able to build out a full engineering team in an era where the average compensation package at OpenAI, full package, is $965,000 a year for a developer, making it impossible for a normal startup to be able to build a team. So there's kind of 25% of our business, those kind of startup. 75% of our business is kind of enterprise class customers, global 1000s.
Hmm.
And here, although we do offer strategic consulting services, to be able to help to both educate the C-suite about what the implications of AI are, and also develop a strategic roadmap for the integration of these AI agents over time. Although we do that, we typically more and more are doing that by partnering with change management firms, more companies that are really focused around corporate culture, right? Because there's huge cultural implications to all the stuff that as this organization evolves toward AI at the core. So, so although we offer those set of services, we're primarily an implementation house. So now that we have that roadmap, here are the 50 agents that need to be developed. Let's knock off number one, number two, number three. And we do that. We do that as turnkey as an organization wants, or as blended with internal resources as the organization wants. So we can be as as deeply embedded in, or as simply staff augmentation for those companies to be able to implement this roadmap.
Incredible. Well, thank you for recognizing the need for this and servicing it as well as it sounds like you do. It seems to be that you're incredibly, you and your company are very, very busy these days.
Well, yeah, we are. And I would say that, and there are certainly other consulting firms that do this kind of work. However, what I would say about us is that we are technology stack agnostic, and that makes us a little bit unique, right? Obviously, if you go to OpenAI to go get these services, or Microsoft or Google, they're more than happy to offer you these services, but clearly they are not technology agnostic. They are going to focus in on their own particular technology stack, which may or may not be the appropriate solution for the particular enterprise problem. So we take very much technology agnostic approach, not just with the generative, with the large language models that get used, but also our ability to integrate narrow AI and more traditional deep learning methods, as well as traditional algorithmic methods. So we tend to be kind of agnostic through the entire stack.
Got it. Got it. Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing all this. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and information around AI. Thank you for the bold predictions. I'm going to write them down and put them on my calendar.
I'm waiting for people to bet
if where,
predictions out there, right? So I'm willing to do a bet on either one of the two.
where can people contact you if they want to take that action, or just to contact you in general for any additional questions?
Again, my name is Armando Viteri. I'm at Nubloc, NEUBLOC, and my email address is aviteri@nubloc.ai.
Great. We will definitely put that information in the show notes. Thank you again so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it this time.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Built to Finish. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you found all of this incredible information about AI useful to anybody, please do share this episode with your network. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Accresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.